finally, the last piece that I'll address in this lecture is Burr's 2003 piece, Crime and Punishment on the Margins of the Post-Apartheid State. And so Burr examines the lack of policing in some areas of South Africa, and how communities will organize themselves for the production of justice, including establishing court systems and meting out punishment, including corporal punishment in the form of beatings, as legitimate and necessary. Since 1994 in South Africa, crime has been seen as an impediment to development and essentially a catchword for everything that has gone wrong with the country as a whole. There is the belief that the police are unable to preserve law and order, and that the only form of justice that is accessible to many citizens in more isolated regions occurs in people's courts. And these people's courts do not necessarily follow what we might consider to be rules of criminal procedure. And certainly some of the efforts to get a quote-unquote confession out of individuals include things such as torture, such as violence. And so the way it would work would be everybody would sit around. For example, Burr goes through one particular court case of a brickmaker who lost two brickmaking machines, and he brings the accusation against a young unemployed male. And again, these young unemployed males are seen as essentially the targets of, or essentially they are typecast as the criminals, as being the criminal elements within society, and they can't really get out of that. They're unemployed, they're underemployed, and this is a structural thing. There are not really a lot of employment opportunities. So the brickmaker brings, I believe it's his nephew, to court, and is accusing him of stealing this brickmaking machine. The individual, the young man, says that he doesn't know anything about it. He completely denies any of the charges at all, and so essentially a couple of individuals bring him out of the courtroom where much of the community is sitting. And from the other room, they can hear his screams and his cries of pain and anguish. He is then brought back into the room, and not surprisingly, he remembers what it is that he actually did. And he's like, "Oh yes, I remember these brick making machines now." And so the older individual, the older man, the brickmaker, gets two brick-making machines back. It turns out that these are not even the same brick-making machines that he lost. Nevertheless, everyone is convinced that justice is served, and so violence against youth, against unemployed or underemployed youth, is seen as a necessary step in the justice process as a whole. And again, this article really speaks to the lack of policing in some regions, and this is in sharp contrast to other regions. A recent story coming out in 2013 highlights the use of police to essentially attack and break the will of striking farmers in South Africa. So overall, in this lecture here, I hope to have given you guys a sense of the situatedness of the notion of justice, of how we conceptualize justice, and that individuals, depending on social positioning within society, depending on factors of social inequality, will have differential access to the justice system, whether this be in terms of enforcement, which would include things like police presence, which would include things like, which we didn't talk too much about in this recorded lecture here, things like what happens in criminal cases, who is representing the accused. Is this a high-paid lawyer, a skilled legal team? Is this a first or second year public defender, or a lawyer of lower caliber? And then also, how do juries of peers, how do they potentially conceptualize or think about individuals of a particular race or ethnicity, and how does that matter in the legal context? Not only the legal context in terms of the enforcement in particular communities, as Parenti shows, but as the statistics have shown also, the life chances and opportunities for individuals to be incarcerated during their lifetime is disproportionately felt amongst African American males in the United States. Um, how is order maintained within society? And part of this has to do, of course, with the sanctions which are imposed upon individuals in terms of the differing forms of punishment. And I talked about Michel Foucault's Discipline and Punish, his 1977 book Discipline and Punish, where he talks about the idea of public torture versus a very regimented control of the prisoner, and how those are very different things and reflect very different notions of what justice is and how justice is conceptualized within a particular society. I hope to have given you a broad outline as well of the prison population across the globe as well as in the United States, and provide some ethnographic examples that demonstrate that police presence is uneven both within country and between countries.